Alright, the Blade SR head disassembly. I know there's quite a few of you out there that have questions about disassembling the head, so I thought I'd make a video on that. This isn't necessarily the way that E-flite would recommend to do it. This is just what makes sense to me. And I'll go ahead and try to show it to you guys step by step. Alright, so the first thing you'll want to do is obviously remove the battery and the canopy. The next thing is removing the blades. One thing I like to do is on the bottom there's a bolt or a nut that holds it in, as well as this bolt. I'd like to put my finger on the nut so it doesn't fall out. I have my nuts CA glued in, so I typically don't have to worry about that, but for you guys out there that don't have that nut down on the bottom glued in, just go ahead and keep your finger there while you unscrew the top Allen bolt. And there you have one blade that will slide right out. Now, the nut underneath may or may not pop out. Mine won't, obviously, since I've stated they're glued in, but if they do pop out, just make sure you don't lose those. And I'll show you a quick and easy method for popping off these linkages. So you have these linkages from the servo to the swash, and one of the easiest ways to remove these is to take a pair of pliers and to gently put one end of the pliers on the end of the ball link, the other end at the top of the linkage, and pop it off. This is actually a really clean and easy method if you don't have ball link pliers, which I do have, but I'm just showing this method for those of you out there so you don't have to buy ball link pliers. Just pops right off just like that. Now if you've never taken your head apart before, it may take a little more pressure than what I'm showing here, as I've taken my head apart quite a few times. Alright, so these three servo linkages have now been popped off of the swash, so the head can come off completely without having these. Now taking off the main gear is a little tricky. You'll need a pair of pliers or a really small nut driver of that size. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to grab onto this nut here with the pair of pliers. I don't know if you can see that. And then on the other side, take your Allen wrench, or in this case I have a set of tools, and unscrew that, or the bolt, the Allen bolt. Now note, when you put this head assembly back together by going in reverse of what I've just pointed out, you do not want to tighten this bolt and that nut too much. The reason why is if you tighten this nut and the bolt too much, you'll actually crack and squish. I've cracked mine because I've tightened it too much. Alright, now with the bolt and the nut removed, you can go ahead and remove the main head assembly. But what you'll do is grab the head securely, and not on points that would break, and hold the main gear down and slide the head up. I like to twist it gently. And eventually you'll have your main gear separated from the main shaft just by sliding it up, and your main shaft will be able to move a little freely up here. Alright, now with the main gear off, you can slide the whole head assembly up as far as it'll go. Then there's this Swashplate anti-rotation bracket right here. You can actually take your thumb, pull the head as far up as it can go, take your thumb and push that anti-swash rotation bracket a little back, not too much to break it, and your swash should be able to pop right out from that. And then you should be able to pull your head assembly right off. Now depending on your main shaft, if your main shaft is a little bent, it may take some force to pull out from these bearings. So here's your main frame. Set that aside. Here is your head, SR head. Alright, taking the main shaft off, because this is one of the components that may bend in a crash. One of the things you'll want to do, you don't necessarily need to take off the retaining collar, but if you're replacing the shaft, obviously it's something you should take off. The retaining collar has a set screw inside of it. You just basically unscrew the set screw a little bit and your retaining collar should slide right off. Now if your shaft is bent, obviously it'll take a little bit more force to take this retaining collar through any of the bends in the shaft. And along with that, you'll see right inside here where the main shaft goes into the plastic head, there is a Jesus bolt, as people refer to. This bolt will need to come out in order for that whole main shaft to come off. Now remember, whenever you're screwing any bolts or screws into plastic, you don't need Loctite. But also along with that, you don't want to over tighten it in plastic because you'll just strip plastic. So this Jesus bolt, this retaining bolt that holds the main shaft on, do not over tighten this when you put the new main shaft on. Otherwise you will strip the plastic, possibly crack it. Alright, the main shaft comes easily out. I like to gently screw it out. It doesn't screw in, just it helps pulling it out when you spin it. Alright, next thing we'll want to take off is these linkages to the swash so that we can get to the blade grips and replace the blade grips. Now, I don't know what these guides are called necessarily, but they kind of snap in place over these blade grips. So I like to just take them off here at the swash. And I'm going to use the same technique as I did before with a pair of pliers. And they should pop right off. And you know, again here where the pillar arms are, you don't necessarily need to take them off at the swash. You can take them off anywhere. I like to take them off at the swash. Again with the same technique. Pair of pliers, pops right off very easily. And I'm going to do that with the rest of the linkages on the swash itself. So now my swash is completely free, and I have only the head assembly left.